I experienced what felt like my own death 15 years ago during a near-death incident. For approximately 1 hour, I was lifeless. The ambulance had to revive me. I was out of it for 47 minutes while they worked on me. I was chatting with other folks. Going to a wedding was something I did on February 15th, 2009. I felt quite well enough to attend my cousin's wedding to Rafi and Kay. It was a blast. My husband and I returned home, and we prepared for our nighttime routine. Because it was getting late, we went to bed. Something was off with me emotionally and spiritually, but there were no outward signs of illness. So I got some rest and went to bed. Then, all of a sudden, I felt my body shaking and realized I was awake, with my eyes closed. Why am I standing up? I wondered as I rose to my feet. Why have I gotten out of bed? When I finally opened my eyes, I found myself in my bedroom. Inside, we had a lighted clock, but outside, it was pitch black. To my surprise, the time read 12:30 in the morning. My usual sleeping spot was occupied by a lifeless person when I glanced down and noticed it. The creature was partially clothed and laying on its back. It took me a minute or two of staring at this corpse before I recognized it as my own. It seemed incredibly strange as I stared at my own body on my own bed. There is no sensation of astral projection here. Even though I've done astral traveling before, the experience was never this crystal clear. I felt like I was genuinely face to face with this person, and now it's all kind of hazy. Consequently, I pondered, what now? Who am I? I really doubt it. I am not feeling dead. I made an effort to return to my body. The whole incident happened really quickly. I was sitting on the bed, then I tripped and fell onto my body. Suddenly, I was standing back up beside the bed. After giving it another go a few of times with the same result, I gave up and accepted the fact that I could never regain control of my physical form. Something was blocking my path. I wondered, what on earth am I going to do? Being dead isn't something I particularly seek. I had the notion, I should probably wake him up, since my spouse was sound asleep on his side in bed. I proceeded to approach him from the other side of the bed in an attempt to shake him, but to no avail. He was too heavy for me to lift or move. I began to raise my voice as a result. In this dimly lit room, I am standing and shouting, "Bernie, get up. I have died. I need your assistance." "Are you blind?" Even when I tried to wake him up, he remained sound asleep. For what seemed like 10 minutes, I shook and yelled at him in an attempt to get him to wake up, but in the end, I just had to admit that he was not going to. I am dead. After that, I wondered, who is going to come get me? I can't find the lights. Why am I even here? To be honest, I was terrified that I was about to transform into a ghost, something I certainly did not want to happen. After then, I beheld a shower of sparkling particles falling from the sky, and I could make out the outline of an adjacent dimension emerging from behind them. Oh, I'm not continuing through that. I thought to myself, I would rather not pass through the area. It would lead me to the place we call heaven, and I knew that after that, I would die. I thought, oh, he's awake, when my spouse sat up out of the blue. He understands what I'm saying. After getting up and walking around, he went into our ensuite bathroom to use the restroom. That was it, I thought to myself. I've had enough. His return, jumping into bed, followed by his sitting up, kissing my cheek, and asking, "Carol, what have you done?" came a few minutes later. Once he switched on the light, he could make out that I was lifeless, blue and soundless. I started cardiopulmonary resuscitation because my husband was a paramedic with an ambulance at the time. "Run, get the ambulance," he yelled as he leaped out of bed and dashed down the hall to one of our kids' rooms in response to my near immediate silence. Bad news. Mom passed away. I could make out his voice as he returned to the room and resumed CPR. I was engrossed in Bernie administering CPR when I heard the sirens approaching. Then I heard the men's footsteps echoing down the corridor and into the bedroom, followed by the sound of the cart and gear. They dragged Bernie out of the room, shoved my bed aside, and lowered me to the floor. To myself, I whispered, "All right, I'm safe." When I finally got my courage up and stepped into that glowing object, I was transported to the right place, heaven. From what I could tell, it was nighttime, at least according to my observations, since the sky was obscured by darkness. Two figures, perhaps humans, stood there, waiting for me. One of them was a towering figure, easily exceeding 8 feet in height, while the other was of average stature. They seemed to be standing close to some sort of oasis. It is true that I have died 3 times. Anybody who reads my history or books would realize this. I wasn't surprised because here's where I've always ended up after I die. As I approached, I overheard one of them identifying himself as Jesus and the other as Metatron, both of which he had previously used. "Oh, hello, Carol. Good to see you again." That was literally it. Tears welled up in my eyes. As I sobbed into their ears, I poured out my heartfelt confessions about how life had been so tough and how much I had suffered. After they consoled me and gave me permission to mourn for a while, they informed me that I could remain dead if I so desired. There was no need for me to return to Earth or carry on with my existence. As I reflected on my life on Earth, I couldn't help but think how incredible it is to be here, in this real yet otherworldly location that isn't even connected to our planet. However, there is no feeling of urgency or pressure, and it is as genuine as Earth. Whether they're humans, animals, or any other kind of being, everyone there is incredibly kind and loving. They gave me some time to consider it and threatened to ask me something if I expressed interest in returning. In a human sense, I remained there for what seemed like an eternity. It took 47 minutes from the time the ambulance came until I was revived, at least in my memory. I was standing in heaven, or rather, seated at that moment, chatting with these individuals during the whole 47 minutes of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, electric shocks, and adrenaline doses. I was inquiring with them. I mean, they might have been completely bonkers, but I needed something to make me feel hopeful about the world and the future. I inquired as to whether or not they were familiar with the long-running and widely watched television series, Star Trek, for example. After I inquired as to whether or not Star Trek existed, they confirmed that it did, setting it in the future, though certainly not in the way depicted. They denied the necessity of religion, church attendance, when I asked them about it. It didn't matter if you believed in a power or anything more than yourself. Learning to be kind, loving, and accepting is, at its core, what life is all about. True love is incredibly challenging to discern, even though I believe we all believe we do. I lingered in paradise, conversing with these folks, and I knew that my counselors, Peter and Hiram, were also present. Thus, I conversed with them for a while. Our conversations mostly revolved around me and how I'd been handling things recently, since I've had my fair share of low points in my life, including periods of intense anger, disappointment, and general unlikability toward both myself and those around me. Being nice and loving is the most important thing, and I'm coming to understand that more as I age. At last, Jesus spoke to me and told me, "If you want to go back, Carol, you need to go now, or it will be too late." The paramedics from the ambulance were still attempting to revive me when I returned to my bedroom after saying my goodbyes to them. They were on the verge of making the call. I overheard one of them asking, "Can't remember the word. How many cycles, I think, is that?" After glancing at another. According to him, the other person remarked, "We've gone through everything." And they exchanged looks. I could tell they were about to break up after that. I prepared to return to my body as a result. And before I did, I paused to carefully study each of the faces of the individuals attending to me. I hoped to be able to recall their names and faces when I was allowed to move freely again. Then I dove headfirst into my body, and the last thing I recollect before the intense heat started to radiate from within was when an ambulance officer proclaimed, "We've got a pulse," a statement I immediately understood. I was alive and well. I had returned. It took them 47 minutes of trying to revive me before they finally succeeded in getting a pulse. Up until a few days later, when I was finally taken out of my coma, that is the last detail of my human existence that I can recall. You don't want to push people to go there before they're supposed to, so I'm hesitant to call it magical. But it was definitely a place where you felt you could find answers, solace, and beings who understood you. Ultimately, I had the option to return or remain in heaven, as previously mentioned. I was under the impression that I had persuaded them to recall me when I initially returned. While in a drug-induced coma at the hospital, I mustered the incredible ability to pull myself out of my coma just long enough to tell my spouse, "I came back for you," before slipping back into my coma. After all this time has passed, I can't help but believe that my loved ones up there were keen for me to return and carry on with my work. Still, I had to make the decision, so they guided me in the appropriate direction.